Hello and welcome to Ticket Manager's All Access interview series, engaging leaders from across the sports marketing spectrum to identify and explore critical issues in the business of sports, entertainment, sponsorship, activation, ticketing, hospitality, and even more than that. I'm your host, Jim Andrews. Joining me on this episode are Steve Gray, Group Vice President of Marketing for UKG, and Pete Falcone, owner and CEO of JP Sports and Entertainment. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Excellent. Steve, I want to start with you because I think it would be helpful to begin today with some background on UKG, which the product of a merger between two companies, Ultimate Software and Kronos, that really both had active sports marketing programs when they came together about 2.5 years ago now. So can you tell us about how those sponsorship portfolios were brought together and integrated and how you operate today?
Sure. Kronos Incorporated was the leader, fairly undisputed leader in workforce management software. And Ultimate Software was among the leaders in human capital management. And we came together in a merger of equals about 2.5 years ago. At that time, we were a little over $3 billion in revenue with about 13,000 employees. Delighted to report that in just the 2 short years since we've been together, we now are over $4 billion in revenue and have about 15,000 employees worldwide. For those who may not be familiar with workforce management or human capital management, we're an enterprise software company that works primarily in time and attendance, workforce analytics, scheduling, benefit administration, payroll, processing, recruiting, onboarding. So think about pretty much everything from hire to retire.
Let's talk about the sponsorship elements of the two companies, and you were obviously in charge of one portfolio, and then all of a sudden here comes another company with, as I said, kind of an active role in sports marketing, but with a bit of a different perspective on things. So how did you handle all that and ultimately integrate?
Well, obviously, we brought two dynamite marketing teams together, and we looked at the talent and skill sets that we have across the full spectrum of the company, and we decided to kind of divide up responsibilities. Based on my experience at Kronos, I took lead responsibility for all of our individual ambassadors, and then the company also, primarily Ultimate Software, had relationships with some sports teams. So, for example, we were on the jersey, the nameplate on the jersey of the Miami Heat. So I have some counterparts in the company who manage our team responsibilities, and I handle all of our individual ambassadors.
So, Pete, tell us about your firm's role in working with Steve and UKG. Can you tell us a little bit about how the relationship started and what you all do for them?
Sure. Steve and I met, I think, Steve, it was 2015, roughly. Mm-hmm. Steve attended an event that we had done for several years. We shared a client and just had some casual conversations. This is obviously when Steve was still with Kronos. And, Steve had said, at some point we may want to go down this road. He spent some time talking to several agencies, and what he liked was that we don't represent anybody, hopefully, among other things. But that differentiator helped, especially when we talked about trying to suggest what might or might not make sense within the individual athlete relationships. So, and to Steve's credit, and Kronos, I think it would be fair to say, was less active than Ultimate Software at that time, prior to the merger, excuse me. So we actually started with Steve and his chief marketing officer, and basically did an audit of the marketplace, just to give them a little bit better perspective of what was going on, not just with their competitors, but in general. And then that led to Kronos retaining JPSE to basically assist with the entire program relative to the individual athletes in multiple sports. And then, somewhat of a sounding board across the golf landscape as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, I might add that I had been beating the drum within Kronos for a couple of years and trying to get smarter myself about the whole area of sports marketing, and particularly ambassadors. And when we finally decided to make a modest investment in that part of our marketing portfolio, I had, I suppose, what you'd call a WTF moment. now that I got that ball over the goal line, how do I go about this? And so based on my prior relationship with Pete, he was one of the first that came to my mind. And I reached out to him knowing that he and his team know many, many, many people across the sports landscape, and particularly in the field of golf. So he helped me put together a request for proposal. He knew which agencies, which agents to send that out to. And of course, we wanted to talk about what questions we needed answered. And that basically was, who do you represent that has something available? What is that something that's available, whether it's the hat or the chest or the sleeve? And at what price do you value that? And that was our kind of our jumping off point for beginning to assemble a short list of candidates with which to start the roster.
And one of the things that we did, Jim, which we try to recommend for all of our clients that we assist, even during COVID, it changed for obvious reasons. But with Steve, as we looked at the men that we were going to try to engage, we did, somewhat of a roadshow. So we took Steve out to a tournament and let him meet a lot of the agents and a lot of the players in person. I don't think it makes sense for someone to invest without having some connection prior to signing on the dotted line. So even during COVID, we did that, with Zoom, obviously, like what we're doing here today. We've done it when it's practical as well, so a deal that may or may not come down the pike down the road, but people are in different parts of the world. Obviously, you're not going to get everybody together in person, but Steve is our primary contact. And we did the same thing with the women a couple months later, as we were just starting to, as the final original Kronos team took form. Right. So
you've really over time kind of grown and diversified that roster of UKG ambassadors. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of some of the reasons for that diversification, getting into sports beyond golf and adding women as well as men. And maybe as part of that, you've already touched on this a little bit, but just talk about the process for screening, vetting, approving these potential ambassadors, because obviously there are a lot to choose from, a lot of very good pro athletes out there. How do you really kind of narrow that down to figure out who's going to be the best fit for the brand values and the goals that you have?
Well, we've been on a little bit of a cycle. Pre-merger, we had, I think, between the two companies, 17 athletes on our respective rosters. As we brought the two companies together, we decided to compress that roster somewhat. So we, at the time of the merger, did not renew all the contracts across both companies. I think that brought us down to around 10 athletes. And from there, we've added back a number of new ambassadors that perhaps better fit some of our priorities in the company that I can talk about a little bit later. As far as the vetting process, it kind of first starts with what sport are we necessarily targeting? And the reason that we're primarily in golf and tennis is because those are the sports that index best with our target audience in terms of C-suite, in terms of decision makers, particularly around, as I said, enterprise software. So that's kind of number one. You can begin to take a number of different sports off the list that perhaps don't have the same level of viewership among the target audience. As far as the athletes themselves are concerned, one of the best sources of intelligence in terms of who we might think of considering as an addition to the roster is our team itself. It's not, I certainly have reached out to members of our ambassador roster and asked their thoughts, asked their opinions on different prospective additions to the team. I'd like to think that at any time we get that group together, they look to their left and they look to their right and they say, I'm proud to be part of this team in terms of the values that we're looking for. So I put a lot of stock in the feedback that we get from the team. Diversity is primary goal for UKG. Our tagline at the company is our purpose is people. We try to work with companies to help them create cultures and workplace environments where employees are highly engaged. And we think that we hold very dear a diverse workforce, people from all backgrounds, and we want that reflected in our ambassador roster. So many of the additions that we've made since bringing the teams together have been to meet some of those diversity goals, whether that's geographic diversity, whether that's ethnic diversity. We added an adaptive athlete to our roster within the past couple of years. And quite honestly, I'm not immediately aware of any other companies that necessarily have as diverse rundown as we do.
You mentioned just some of the objectives for doing this. I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of the why behind all of this. What are you getting out of these relationships, and also, and maybe Pete, you can speak to this a little bit. Just how are you activating the partnerships now with these ambassadors? Because we all know it's more than just having that logo on the shirt. You want to do more than that to really bring these things to life. So we can talk first about kind of the strategy and objectives, and then also how you're leveraging the relationships.
I mean, the two primary benefits, I believe, of the ambassador program are to expand and build brand awareness through exposure of the logo, primarily through television, but also social media and many of the platforms that the athletes have. And then, of course, customer connection, whether that's through some form of hospitality, golf outings, ways that we can leverage our relationships and extend that to our customers and to our prospects.
Right. I mean, on the awareness side, Steve, as I recall, post-merger or pre-merger, both of the two companies had awareness in the 70s or 80 percentile. And then post-merger, it dipped in the short term a fair amount. And this was one way that really helped, among other things, spike the awareness back up to the levels that UKG required, frankly, because collectively, how this works, Jim, you can measure the media value, and it's significant. We've been fortunate, Steve and the team selected a bunch of really good players who have had some great success. So that tangible value has been clear year over year, which helps tell the story.
Yeah, as Pete said, when prior to the merger, Kronos was in the 80s for unaided recall among the target audience. I think Ultimate was right alongside there in the high 70s. When we brought the two companies together, we created an all new entity, new name, new tagline, new color palette, new logo. And really, in retrospect, our ambassador program has been a little bit of a secret weapon in the sense that because we had programs established and in place that we could build upon, that became immediately a tool for the company to build brand awareness around this new name. I also think we have one of the best logos in the business. We've been told that it really pops off the screen, pops off the apparel of our athletes, and so this has been a very important part of our brand awareness program. I might Jim, I might just mention who our roster are, who are the athletes on our roster. If for those who may not be familiar, on the senior PGA Tour, we have a pretty well-known name in Freddie Couples. We recently added Nota Begay this year as he embarked on the senior tour. On the PGA Tour, we have Daniel Berger, JT Poston, Will Zalatoris, and we recently added Saf Igala. On the LPGA, we've got a very robust roster: J. Marie Green, Marina Alex, Megan Kang, Brittany Altamare, Brooke Henderson, Lexi Thompson, and Nelly Corda. And we also have a relationship with the National Women's Soccer League and a pay equity effort around that sport. And Sydney LaRue and Kristen Press are both ambassadors of the company. Ash Barty, who at one time was ranked #1 women's tennis player in the world out of Australia. And then finally, former Navy SEAL injured in Afghanistan, Dan Kanasan is our adaptive athlete representative.
No, that really is a diverse roster. That's awesome. I want to come back and ask you specifically about Ash in just a second. But in terms of, so you, obviously the hospitality, you're assume you're bringing clients out to tournaments and matches and things like that, and having some involvement with the ambassadors. But you also mentioned social media as well. Are there anything in particular that you ask of your ambassadors? Obviously, it's not necessarily, yours is not a product that they are, using day to day, right? It's a business product. But so how does the social media angle work for you all?
I mean, we have a regular interaction schedule every couple of weeks with the social team, and we've been doing that since the days of Kronos. And it's taken a few. There's been a couple different success stories, is what I should say. So back to the tagline of the company. The employee engagement piece is meaningful, and so there's been some one-offs that don't meet the public eye where we've had the players support various things on a higher profile level. There's been, International Women's Day. We've done some things where the pros get involved philanthropically. We've integrated them into something that was either a one-off or part of what would become a regular annual effort. Client engagement, things like that. It's not just about playing golf with them, but getting some client engagement beyond just playing golf or seeing them in a suite during a meet and greet. So, I mean, all of the above, and it evolves as you can imagine. It's a little more challenging internationally. But domestically, obviously, it's even easier. So, and it's been effective.
Yeah, we've leveraged the relationships in many, many different ways. From a social media standpoint, it could simply be that maybe one of our athletes gives a shout out on the company's anniversary to their followers, and maybe a word about how much they value the relationship with the company. We've had athletes record brief videos that we have used with customers and prospects in sales situations. We've had some fun with them. I think it was a year or so ago, we did a putt for charity where each week one of our LPGA players had to, or was challenged with, making a series of putts from various distances, and the more putts they made, the more we donated to charity. And each week they would hand off to another of their UKG teammates with another challenge. So lots of ways to have fun beyond just doing golf outings, or perhaps a meet and greet at a tournament or something like that.
And we try not to jam them all into the same box, right? So it's not like every single time we do it, every single person has to participate. We try to be a little more thoughtful and figure out why it would make sense to integrate certain members of the overall team.
We did a virtual Q&A, for example, during the pandemic, when all of us were, cooped up at home and we couldn't get out and do in-person outings and whatnot. And we invited customers and prospects to participate in that, ask questions of the athletes.
We mentioned Ash Party, and I'm always interested to know how partners respond when something unexpected happens, such as when, at the age of 25, she decided that she was going to retire, even though she was ranked number one, coming off a Grand Slam victory. That obviously, I would assume, changed some plans that you had in place. So how did you kind of make a pivot there when she did that?
Well, first of all, let me say that Ash is a fantastic ambassador for UKG. We've really very much valued our relationship with her, and she's just been a wonder. It did, however, come as a surprise when she made that decision. We certainly were not planning on that, but we still valued the relationship that we have with Ash, and so we decided to just kind of not reevaluate, but to kind of redirect the activities that we would do with her. We clearly, she's not competing on a global stage anymore. We don't get the brand exposure that we would be getting if she were in the semifinal or final of a major. But that doesn't mean that she can't be of great value to us, particularly in country. I mean, she's a national treasure in Australia, and so we kind of rewrote the contract and redirected the kinds of activities that we would be doing with her, but kept the relationship in place and continue to count her as among our ambassadors.
I think to wrap up, I'd just like to hear, Steve, we'll start with you, and Pete, chime in here definitely, just about where you would like to see your sponsorship program kind of go from here? Just kind of, if you could just kind of wave a magic wand and say, this is what we would love to have, and what that might require from some of your current partners, ambassadors, or folks that you might be working with in the future.
We definitely are very strategic in our roster additions. As I said, we have a very strong set of diversity goals, and so as we think about expanding, or even in some cases perhaps contracting the roster, that's at the top of the list in terms of what we want to try to accomplish. We always have to be cost conscious. We don't have an unlimited budget, and we want to be very judicious in the way that we're making that investment. We want to make sure that our ambassadors continue to represent the values that we want our brand to stand for. And so those are all considerations. As you just mentioned a moment ago with Ash, we also aren't completely and always in control of our destiny. Each of these ambassadors are competitors. They have their goals, and we'd like to think that those are always in sync with UKG, but sometimes there can be a divergence there as well. And we very much respect each one of our ambassadors and what they're trying to accomplish. I would tell you, probably should have mentioned earlier, one of the challenges for a sponsor on activations is simply managing around the athlete's competitive schedule.
Sure.
Whether it's the PGA or the LPGA, they are competing on a global stage. They are, moving from continent to continent for competition, and that may or may not always align easily with the seasonality of a golf outing in a given part of the country or even a given part of the world. So sometimes that's arguably one of the biggest challenges of the activations, is trying to find availability that works for both the athlete and for UKG.
And especially for your organization, I mean, there's these executive summits that happen throughout the year, and it's obviously valuable to have one of the men or women participate. But if it's on a Wednesday during an event week where he or she is playing, then obviously that's going to be a non-starter. One of the things I think that UKG deserves credit for, and Steve in particular, is from day one, there's obviously been the fact that strategy has to be appropriate, and there's conversations and deliberations that go around that. But there's been a couple instances, at least, where we were able to kind of get in front of the market, and they've done a really good job on being opportunistic. Right. It's still adhered to all the things that made sense for their business. But there's been, a couple times here in the past 12 months where, for a big company, they can move quickly when they need to, which is frankly refreshing for people on our side of the table.
Gentlemen, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes today and telling us a little bit more and looking behind the curtain, if you will, at what you both are doing. As I said, looks like a great program, and obviously you're having success with it, and wish you continued success with all of the different relationships you have, and Pete, obviously with you and your other clients as well. Just want to thank both of you for coming on, and maybe we'll get to do this somewhere down the road again.
Sounds good. Thank you for having us.
That would be great. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. And on behalf of everyone at Ticket Manager, thank all of you for watching and listening. And please join us again for the next episode in the All Access interview series.